Okay. All right, we are recording. Welcome everyone to our Affordable Housing Preservation Task Force Mobile and Manufactured Housing Subcommittee meeting on December the 1st to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA. This subcommittee needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It is a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the subcommittee is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each subcommittee member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. I will start with myself, Michelle Crocker. I am here in Alexandria, Virginia. Mr. Rick Edson. I think Rick is not here with us today. David Levine.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. This is David Levine. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia.
Thank you, David. Eric Maribojak.
I am Eric Maribojak. I'm in Fairfax, Virginia.
Thank you, Eric. Ken McMillan.
Yes.
And Ken has not joined us. Jill Norcross. Oh, Ken. Hello.
Ken is there.
Hey. Ken, can you just state your name and where you are, please?
Ken McMillan, Fairfax County, Providence District.
Thank you very much. Jill Norcross.
Hi, Jill Norcross, calling in from Reston, Virginia.
Okay. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to subcommittee member David Levine so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion.
Okay, I'll take the gavel.
Okay. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this subcommittee. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to vote on this? Do we need to take a vote?
I guess so.
Okay.
I don't think we normally do, but I think we probably.
I can't remember. I think, okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID pandemic makes it unsafe for this subcommittee to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this subcommittee and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this subcommittee may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line, and that the public must access this meeting by calling 1-844-621-3956 and entering access code 179-958-5721. Anyone interested in joining the WebEx for the visual component must click the link which was included in the public meeting notice and which will be included in the minutes to join the meeting through WebEx. It is so moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and are necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the sub duties and responsibilities. Can you hear me? It says that I'm muted.
It paused you for a moment.
Okay, sorry. I'll continue. The meeting comports with continuity in government as it ensures that the Preservation Task Force can engage in the work to ensure the development of strategies to enable the successful preservation of affordable housing in Fairfax County, for which time is of the essence. Failure to take these actions could cause irreparable harm to the preservation of affordable housing in the county. It is so moved. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. David, if you would return the gavel,
Yes.
we will continue with the meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll return the gavel to Michelle.
Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to our third and final meeting of the Mobile and Manufactured Housing Subcommittee. I thought before we began with our presentation today, it might be helpful just to have a very, very brief recap of what we've looked at in our last two meetings. So I'm just going to run through a list of things that we have talked about and discussed before we get into today's brief presentation, and then a discussion of recommendations, which I think will be the meat of our conversation. So we have looked at, defined, manufactured, and modular housing, and noted the differences between the two. We heard a brief history of mobile homes and learned about the 1976 adoption of construction and safety standards that were developed by HUD. We got an overview of all of the mobile home parks in Fairfax County, with a focus on those located around the Richmond Highway corridor. We looked at their location along the corridor, and we examined the demographics, specifically incomes of people who lived in the mobile home communities, education levels, access to healthcare, housing cost burdens, and how these communities were rated in the Healthy Places Index. We also had a discussion about land use and zoning around mobile home communities in Fairfax County. While the comprehensive plan identifies them as an important affordable housing resource in the county, the underlying zoning does not always support that language. And we know that many parks can be developed into other uses as a matter of right. We also looked at the Manufactured Home Community Coalition of Virginia, a coalition of mobile home communities around the state. And we looked at how valuable a resource they are to provide residents of mobile home communities with education, communications, help with mobile home maintenance and repair. They provide models for code enforcement, and also they can identify financing tools and other strategies for how to convert the park to a true homeownership model. So with that, those are really the highlights of what we've looked at in the last two meetings. I thought we would spend just a very brief amount of time looking at state legislation, state authority, and oversight of mobile home communities. So Judith, I think we can start the PowerPoint. Okay, thank you. The next slide, please. So these are, we have seen bits and pieces of these 4 items before, and they really address where the Virginia State Code talks about manufactured housing. And this first fundamental laws for manufactured housing really governs the production of these units to make sure that they conform with the HUD safety and construction standards. And that is overseen by the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. The next bullet here, regulating zoning laws for mobile homes, I'm happy if there's any staff or others on this call who, if I'm not describing this correctly, as I read this article, it looked like what it was doing is making an exception in any land that is zoned as agricultural or forestry or farming, ensuring that manufactured homes can actually be located on those sites in that land that's zoned for those other uses. The next bullet, tenant protections. This is a law or in the code of the state, the Manufactured Home Lot Rental Act, that really spends quite a bit of time looking at a variety of protections and responsibilities, protections for tenants and responsibilities of landlords. So it covers things like written leases required, terms of the lease agreement and renewals, landlord obligations, tenant obligations, charge for utility service, demands and charges prohibited. There's a whole list of things. I did see that there is an item in this bill that talks about the sale of manufactured home park to a developer. And it notes that for residents in Planning District 8, which is where Northern Virginia is located, that relocation expenses are the equivalent of $3,500 per household in the event of having to move or be relocated. So this Manufactured Home Lot Rental Act really holds quite a bit of information around the governance of mobile home communities. And the last item, local permits required before moving a mobile home and a property tax system, really highlights the process that residents in a mobile home community would need to go through to transfer their unit to true home ownership. And I think the next two slides will go into more detail about that. So are there any questions about this slide? Okay, next slide, please. So this is kind of the list of steps that owners need to take to convert a mobile home. We just, can we go back one, please? Thank you. To convert a mobile home into a true ownership. And I think we will remember that mobile homes are considered chattel property. And so you actually register them with the DMV like you would a car. So these are the steps that you have to take to convert that mobile home to true home ownership: removal of the wheels. The owner of the mobile home has to also own the real property that the home is located on. They need to, I guess, make sure they have free and clear title to their mobile home. Next slide, please. These are the kinds of information that have to be attached to their affidavit to make this conversion. So it's a series of, I guess, just like you would with a car, to declassify that mobile home as chattel property to real property. Are there any questions on this? This is obviously very detailed, but I think the point in showing this is that there is a process to move into homeownership. It is not as simple as just residents buying the park or a change of ownership in the park, that there is a more of a multi-step process that owners would need to go through. Okay, next slide, please. This, I think, is a probably the most important slide that we'll look at of all of them. This talks about how states have the authority to adopt laws that govern manufactured home issues. However, most of the policies that impact these communities happen at the local level through land use and zoning. And this slide identifies categories that local policy can significantly impact the ability of manufactured housing to play a meaningful role in the supply of affordable housing. And these, I think, will come as no surprise to any of us. These are things that we have discussed. So local zoning policies that allow manufactured homes to be sited on land owned by the homeowner. Now, this, I think, is talking about manufactured or modular housing that is permanently fixed on a site and is not mobile. Local zoning policies that preserve manufactured home communities. And I don't know, we did not discuss if Fairfax County has any prohibitions on manufactured housing. That is housing that is made in a factory and then brought to a site and affixed to the site, hooked up. The possibility of obtaining a local moratorium on closure of manufactured home communities, local tax incentives and other financial incentives for preservation of manufactured home communities. And finally, the inclusion of these manufactured housing issues in the consolidated plan that local jurisdictions, including Fairfax County, submits on, I think, an annual basis when they seek CDBG funding or other funding from HUD. So these are some of the strategies, and this comes from the National Consumer Law Center, broad strategies that communities can think about adopting in order to preserve and strengthen their manufactured home communities. Does anyone have any question or comment on these?
Yes, I want to go back a moment. The $3,500 fee, does that cover every single mobile home, regardless of the size? Or is that a sliding scale up or down depending on the size? Or how does that work exactly?
Ken, the way that the statute reads, all it says is $3,500 per household. So it doesn't, it doesn't speak to size. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and the final slide, the next slide, please. Is really looking at landlord obligations. And this again comes out of that, that longer act that I talked about, the Manufactured Home Lot Rental Act. This is under the landlord obligations that really speak to the overall governance of the park around health, safety, zoning, making repairs to keep the park habitable and in good condition, clean and safe, keeping all of the electrical, plumbing, sanitary, heating, HVAC systems, everything that the landlord supplies in good working order, providing and maintaining appropriate receptacles for garbage and waste pickup, and also providing reasonable access to electric, water, and sewage disposal connections. So what was not clear to me in looking at this list of landlord obligations is where is the oversight? Is it at the state level or the local level, and ensuring compliance with some of these basic obligations? And there are, to be clear, there are also tenant obligations as well. So I think that's the end of our, does anyone have any questions on this or any of the slides? I think this is the end of the slide presentation.
One more question.
Sure.
So there's a landlord and tenant handbook that's on the county website. Are the mobile homes part of that agreement, which mainly states for buildings of structure, apartment buildings and things of that nature? Does the mobile homes fit into that agreement or not?
You know, that's a really good question, Ken. I'm assuming because there is a separate list of tenant and landlord obligations that govern mobile homes that it might not apply, but I really don't know. Does anyone else know whether tenant landlord law in the county applies or if that's just for apartment buildings?
It's not a big deal right now. It's just, Judith, stop. It's not a big deal right now. I mean, we can look at it later on. I mean, I just wanted to know.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good question.
Yeah, but we only got about a little over half an hour, so let's not dwell on that. Let's move on, please.
I was just going to add that in my board office, I have used the county's resources for tenant landlord for people who weren't in apartments. They may have been renting in a home, or I guess it just applies if you also. I guess it would depend on the structure of how that person is.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, but that's a good question to investigate, just not only for what the obligations are, but again, compliance of whatever those requirements are. So hopefully all of you received, I know Judith sent out this kind of draft list of recommendations that were drawn up. I've asked her, I always feel like it's easier to work from a draft than to try to create something from scratch. So this is most definitely a draft. And Judith is going to put it up on the Google Doc screen here. And I think I would love everyone's comments and thoughts. This is meant to be edited and enhanced by all of you. So it will be a much stronger and better document.
Is it showing now?
It is
No.
not. We have a blank
Okay.
screen.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm not sure why it's taking so long.
It's cold out.
Let me try again.
There we go.
Okay.
Can we make it a little bigger?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Great. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So as you can see, the first recommendation is to develop a standing mobile home interagency group, committee, whatever you want to call it, that includes staff from neighborhood and community services, housing and community development, and the Department of Planning and Development. I also would include on there the health department, and I don't know if I'm just adding that myself, but advocates, of course, and mobile home community residents to address the mobile home and manufactured housing recommendations as its charge. Or maybe what we should do, maybe the best way to approach this is for, hopefully all of you, it's a short document. Is there anything in here that's missing? Let's start with that. Does anyone think that there's an important element that's missing?
Michelle, this is Eric. Would there be a benefit? I know some of I think there's like, what do we say, 8 or 9 mobile home parks in Fairfax County. Is there any benefit to having at least one representative from the ownership?
Yes, I think it's an excellent idea. I would think that park owners should be represented. How do others?
Because we have at least two owners, I think, that are the two largest ones that are more, I guess, professional nationwide owners of mobile home parks, and maybe they could add some perspective from how they operate things in other parts of the country that work, and that they do this on a portfolio basis as well. So they might have some input in this.
Yeah, Eric, I think it's an excellent suggestion because if they're excluded, that's an immediate kind of flaw in the process, I feel. So I think they should definitely be included in any kind of yes, I think they need to be on the
list. Also, the other benefit of that I was thinking was, to the extent that there's difficulty in owners and residents communicating for whatever reason, then the standing agency group becomes a forum to bridge that problem with third parties in attendance. That might not be a bad thing to have if it's needed.
Actually, I think that's a good idea, because how else would you mediate certain things? The tenant sees one point of view, the owner sees another point of view, and then somewhere we try to meet in the middle. So I think that's a good question, a good additive, I think, Michelle.
Yep, I agree. Thank you. Anything else that you see missing? Or something that shouldn't be here?
I think along the same lines in the second recommendation, where you're talking about exploring ways to introduce principles from the Coalition for Tenant Education and Governance. And I know it discusses technical assistance for unit improvements and maintenance, but also for the park maintenance and improvements too, just kind of also including the ownership in that recommendation as well. So it's not even, I guess it's more engagement with the owners, not just oversight, just bringing them in and giving them access to technical assistance and resources.
Yep. So there's two ways to think about this. We can recommend that a standing committee be formed with all of the participants. And then we can add that these are additional recommendations that the standing committee address, the following, in addition to anything else that they come up with. And that way we don't have to keep adding who should be involved in each of the recommendations. So I'm happy to do it however you all want to do it. But I was kind of envisioning that this committee would then take the following recommendations under consideration in addition to others. So
I think that's a good plan.
I agree. I think to your point, Michelle, that although we can make recommendations from what we've done the last couple of weeks, that both tenants and advocates and ownership that have been through this more than we have will probably have other things that they can recommend in addition to the ones we've thought of.
And I think I'm envisioning that this committee, while it may be an ad hoc committee, it will probably be around for a couple of years. This is going to take work to think about these parks. This is not something that will meet in 6 months and disband. So I could be wrong. It will be up to the committee what their charge is, but I envision that there's some work that will need to be done. So, okay, how about some of the other recommendations?
So, Michelle, for the second recommendation, so one of the things I learned when I watched the South County panel on mobile housing There were a couple of I think it was the person from Richmond who was the oversight by the county for mobile home parks down there. One of the things he said, which struck me, was they were trying to investigate or provide oversight over one particularly poorly run mobile home park. And although they did cite the owner to improve some of the common areas, they also ended up citing the individual units, which in the process of investigating the property, they saw the units themselves were not compliant. But they did recognize also that it was sort of a burden for the community to comply fully with those standards because it was a very low income community. So I was just wondering that in the process of encouraging oversight or inspection of these properties, that might inadvertently become also an effect of what we're doing. And maybe hand in hand with that, which I think they did down there, is when they go into a park and inspect the property as well as the units, they do have, I think in their case, they set aside money in order to offer as assistance to the renters to correct some of the more health and safety issues. And I think that's a good thing to have hand in hand because we don't want to inadvertently create an economic burden on some of these tenants by the fact that we're recommending more oversight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that struck me as well, Eric, that both tenants and landlords were cited in violation. So are you suggesting that some sort of reserve fund be set up to assist tenants in any violations?
Or maybe when that is done as a program, the county has either an advocate partner or some funding in hand in case those things come up, and that they can be addressed either with an advocate partner or some public funds. But just to cover that contingency, and I guess in the Richmond case, they actually did find a lot of health and safety upgrades that were needed for the units themselves that they ended up assisting the tenants on. Okay. So it'd be good to be a little bit preemptive, I guess, if we do that.
And just to be clear, the responsibilities of the landlord to maintain the park are his or her responsibilities, and we're not talking about, because they are obviously deriving income from these parks. So, right. So we're looking to really help the residents, predominantly low-income households with any deficiencies they may have in their units. Okay, how does everyone feel about that recommendation?
I like the recommendation. The only thing I wonder is how often or frequently are inspections held for specific, whether it be on the landlord's part or the tenant's part, but how frequently are they done to keep people in line? I mean, think about this, and I'm coming from my experience as a firefighter. If you are not up to code and that code goes for so long, you're talking about something that places the tenants as well as the owner in danger. So if there's no inspection, I know that apartment buildings did a cycle of when they inspect for fire extinguishers, open doors that are not closed, that so forth and so on, stairwells that are cluttered with stuff that should not be in the stairwell. I don't know that we have the same particulars for a mobile home because I've never actually been in one, you know what I'm saying? So it's not in my purview, but I wonder about with Eric's suggestion, is there a mandate on the frequency of inspections to see if, are you shaking your head, Michelle? So is there?
I think Ken, we're just, it's a great thought, but I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds of implementation. Okay. So these are really broad recommendations that I would imagine some sort of oversight committee or even breaking into various committees would really dig into. So,
Okay.
I think it's a really good point, but I don't know that we at this stage should be kind of getting to that level. Does everyone kind of agree with that, or do you want to get into identifying, it may be under tenant landlord law or property management that these things have to happen on a specific basis. It may be written someplace else that we don't know about.
No, I agree, Michelle. I think we should not get too far into the weeds on that, because I don't know that we're familiar enough with all the regulations around that and code enforcement. And it just may be a little bit too much in the weeds for the committee.
As we look at the other recommendations, your thoughts?
Yeah, could I, this is David. First of all, thank you, Michelle, for putting these together. I think they look really, really good. I was just wondering on the fourth recommendation, we're talking about one-for-one replacement, which is that kind of encompasses a lot. And it could have a real different kind of meaning for different people. Because one thing that we have to keep in mind that when you're dealing with mobile homes or manufactured housing, you're talking about an asset. And so you're really talking about sort of an asset disposition here, a process around asset disposition. And when we talk about one-for-one replacement, are we talking about giving like value for an asset that was lost, that, to make sure that people get the value out of that asset? Or is it really looking at making sure that it remains affordable, in terms of the new housing that replaces it? And that's sort of what I'm saying is that it's sort of an easy discussion around renters because they don't own an asset. If you redevelop a multifamily apartment building and the rents are at a certain level, you can create a new apartment building where the rents are at the same level, remaining affordable. But when you're dealing with someone's home in home ownership and an asset, it's one-for-one replacement gets a little bit more difficult because are you talking about replacing the full value of that home? Are you talking about giving them something that's affordable for them, where they can maintain their housing in an affordable unit? So what I would suggest here is, again, I think it gets a little murky with the term one-for-one replacement. I happen to like the term no net loss of affordable housing. I think it's a little bit more, I think it's a little bit broader. I think it encompasses more, and it gives you more room to work with that. I think when you're talking about one-for-one replacement, it just gets a little bit more difficult when you're dealing with mobile homes. That's just my thought on it. So.
No, good, really good thoughts, David. If you take a look at the recommendation after that, I, like you, had a hard time figuring out how you do a one-for-one replacement or a no net loss with mobile homes. And I think
right.
that regardless of how we land on this, the county has, I went back and looked at some of the language around preservation, and they use one-for-one replacement and they use no net loss, but they do not define clearly what that means in terms of bringing families back, right of first refusal, the type and the tenure of the housing, the size of the units, the income levels. All of this needs to be, and this will be, I don't know that the county has ever done a replacement, well, I don't think they have, of mobile homes. Moving people out of this kind of quasi home ownership, as you say, an asset that they've invested in, albeit unfortunately a depreciating asset, but still an investment. And replacing that, I am skeptical that anyone's going to be excited about being moved into a 2 or a 3 bedroom apartment.
No, right. No, absolutely.
So what does providing replacement housing mean in a scenario like this? And unlike an apartment building that's being developed, and I think it gets down into one of the later recommendations, this is really the displacement of an entire community. So for anyone, an entire neighborhood. So for anyone who watched that video that the residents of Ray's Mobile Home Park did, you got the sense that this was a community. And one of the planning commissioners last Wednesday night said this is really an economic and cultural displacement of an entire community. And we would never do that in a single family detached community in the county. The county has a policy that it preserves established neighborhoods. So I think the case could be made that this is really an established neighborhood, an established community, and how do you replace that? So,
and the other thing,
go ahead.
The other thing, Michelle, is, and like I say, I'm new to this. I got invited to this, the mobile task home, but who really owns that dwelling? I know in some cases there's a dwelling there, and some people will go into rent, and the owner is actually the landowner, and they're renting to that. But in other cases, I've seen where people have bought their own mobile homes and decided to plant their house into that area, that space that they provide. So there becomes a muddy or murky water situation about, the one-for-one placement, and I agree with David, I don't know that we can swallow that pill just yet.
Ken, I think we don't know yet, and you'll see that one of the recommendations further on down is that we do a survey and an inventory. But I'm guessing, and I could be very wrong, that for many of these mobile homes that we're looking at on the Richmond Highway corridor, people own the unit, but they are renting the pad from the landlord. So I don't know if anyone actually owns the land under their unit. I don't know that you could, I don't know, but that's something to find out.
I don't think that they do, but I know that we had a guy who worked for this building with the old management, but he actually owned his mobile home. But he moved it to another area because the rent or something got too high. So he just packed it up and jacked it away. And but I'm not familiar with down the Route 1 or the one that's up in Fairfax County by on Route 50. I'm sorry, Route 29. So that's why I'm asking the question. There could be divide. So.
Yeah. I think a lot more exploration needs to be done. Yeah. Okay. Are we good with, I think David made some really good points.
Yeah.
We're good with what was added. Let's see. Is there anything else?
And I just want to make sure that this one was what I was hearing a couple of conversations back about the funding source and advocacy partner.
I would maybe, Eric, are we talking about really a reserve fund for, this was your idea of making sure that there was some funding?
Of the units as opposed to the landlords.
Eric, you were muted for the beginning of what you said. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Didn't catch that quick enough.
Yeah, so I would add there at the end, explore developing a funding source or advocacy partner that can work with residents if and when issues arise regarding the mobile home units in the course of an inspection of mobile park infrastructure, of the mobile park. Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea, Eric. I like that.
Yeah.
And looking at a reserve fund of some kind to help them with the repairs. I mean, absolutely.
Mhm.
If I could just add to, I think it's the 5th recommendation on the Rays mobile home park. So I belong to the Mount Vernon SSPA task force, and we made the recommendation to move ahead to the comp plan work plan for the comp plan on that nomination. And I presented it at the Planning Commission that Michelle referenced. I spoke on behalf of the task force and presented that. And and that's also where Leah and Mary had the video of the trailer park, Rays and Ingleside, which was very effective. I thought it was really well done. It was an excellent video. But one thing I think I just want to emphasize, I can tell you that the task force, we had a lot of discussion about it. We had a lot of exchange with the residents there. And we ended up moving it to the work plan. The reason is that we feel that that's the best place for the community to become engaged on this development. That there's really no other channel in the planning process in Fairfax County for that to happen. So right now, by moving it to the comp plan amendment process and then ultimately to rezoning, it's going to give an opportunity to the residents to really shape what they want in that community. And that's kind of how we came out at the end, the task force did. Because really, there are no strong protections in Virginia or in the county for the residents right now. And I think you heard it. I mean, Michelle, you probably heard it at the Planning Commission and also from the planning staff that I think they do recognize and acknowledge the need to really protect that site and to really get the residents involved in a solution there. And I'm pretty optimistic that they'll do that. I have a very good feeling that they will ultimately end up involving the residents in that in that process. The other thing you have to keep in mind that by right, Joe Franconi, the owner, could go ahead and put in commercial, just could go develop it for commercial properties by right. I mean, so at least he's recognized too that he really should engage with the community and look to preserve that affordable housing. So anyway, I just want to give some background on that too. But one thing I'll say on this recommendation, that I think it's important that we have those meaningful community engagements, and that's specified in the first bullet point. But I'm not inclined to like giving solutions or handing down solutions to the community. I think it has to be really driven from a grounds up, really actions and momentum. I think it really has to come from the community. Like we can look at solutions like community land trusts or resident owned communities of that sort, but it really has to be driven by the residents themselves. You see what I mean? I think we can't really be imposing solutions, on them, honestly.
I agree wholeheartedly with that, David. I agree. We're not the ones who live there. We also, in including them and allowing them to argue their point and see from their advantage, we also probably should put in a, what's the word I want to use? An educational thing so that they know exactly what goes on. A lot of people that live in mobile homes don't really have all the facts in hand. So they may talk among themselves on some really out of the ballpark ideas that may not be advantageous for anybody. So, I agree with what you say wholeheartedly. but we have a responsibility to educate them, to get them prepared for whatever it is, whatever decision they want to make or whatever direction they want to go to. We should be able to help them get to where they want to be, so they're properly informed.
This is, can you hear me? This is Dan Lamar.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I've got a weird thing with my computer right now where I have to keep my phone on for audio purposes. So I apologize for the echo. I actually want to disagree with David. Joe Francone and Jamie Turner made no effort to engage the community ahead of this. In fact, every effort was made to prevent the community from knowing this. And it's hard for me to, reconcile that behavior and then expect with the future expectations that they are somehow going to be better citizens and be more engaged. The facts are that the reason many of these people know about this at all is because the county reached out to them. And I don't think you are dealing with a lot of cultural barriers here. And I think it actually is our prerogative in a polite, respectful, and appropriate way to advocate on behalf of citizens who may otherwise be uncomfortable advocating for themselves. This begets a wider solution or a broader solution than just this process. I don't believe the SSPA process is, right now at least, doesn't seem to be the right kind of vehicle to solve or to address what we want or what we think mobile homes and mobile home communities, or what should happen to them, excuse me. I also don't agree with that they'll just develop the land by right. I think that's an easy argument, and it's something that the developer made, or that their lawyer made in the letter. There's no demand for commercial real estate on Richmond Highway. There's barely demand for retail anymore. The reason they took the deal was because it was the very best option that they had. They don't have a good option for this site unless it's a combined assemblage with the remaining parcels. So you've got a big site, which is like the best nearby with the huge lot. It's the largest component. And then you've got a few other smaller pieces, and combined, these the size that they probably want. I also, like, just relative to Embark, I realize that the SSPA is about not what the comp plan says now, but what we want it to say and what changes we want to make to it. But the Embark Richmond Highway forced a lot of questions, and one of the questions was, what do you do with the areas in between the CBCs? And we, at the time, like, the SNAs would have a lower intensity of development, but we would also plan for future development in those SNAs. This proposed development sits in between two CBCs, and in particular sits outside of the watershed of two BRT stations. And it's hard for me to imagine the viability of the intensity of development that the developers propose in that space. I mean, the type of intensity that they're proposing is, quite frankly, more in keeping with a CBC-based development that's within the watershed of a BRT station. So that means that people have access to the public transportation that we're going to build on Richmond Highway, which is a critical piece to future development there. So I just think that there's a lot here that doesn't quite add up. You know, you've got to, they don't have many options for this site as a C8 property. There really aren't any. It's in between two CBCs, yet the intensity of development that they're proposing is more in keeping with what you would expect within a CBC. Additionally, they're talking, if we're talking about a 1-for-1 replacement bare minimum, that's 109 units in a development. I mean, we can do the math here. That's a big development. That is a huge project. So I kind of want to, I'm not really sure that I agree with what David is saying about this project. I don't think that they will develop this. And I think that we need to engage the community. I think that the developer needs to be a faithful steward and engage the residents and have them be part of whatever future solution we have. And I think it can't just be one trailer park at a time, unfortunately. We've got to take a comprehensive countywide view on this. It cannot be just one. Sorry, Lorraine.
Dan, thank you so much. I want to remind everyone of something that happened in 2005 when a major developer came into Tysons and proposed some significant redevelopment at Tysons 1. And Fairfax County said, we're going to put your proposal on hold because we are planning a major redevelopment of the 1,700 acres of Tysons, given that the rail was coming. And for 5 years, from 2005 till 2010, the Tysons Land Use Committee met and they worked out the vision for the comprehensive plan for the redevelopment of Tysons. And then the Planning Commission took that language, and from 2010 till 2012, they developed into plan language and zoning language the new vision for Tysons. So from 2005 till 2012, now we had somewhat of a recession in between, and so it was fortuitous that it fell, but that all of that development for Tysons was put on hold because the county said, we, as Dan just mentioned, we want to take a more comprehensive look at this area. So what I'm hoping is that through the Preservation Task Force and this focus on mobile home communities, that we can say, can we put a pause while Fairfax County looks comprehensively at this inventory? And so I guess if we can just scroll down to the last couple recommendations, Judith, the last one is that we do a survey, that we understand who is living in these communities. We have a sense of the inventory of these mobile homes, as Eric talked about, creating a reserve fund that can assist them with repair. It may be that the repair is not worth what's needed. You know, we don't know what we don't know. And so it is my sincere hope that any plans can be put on hold while the county takes a more comprehensive look at this. So do any subcommittee members?
Michelle, this is, yeah, Michelle, this is Eric. I'm sorry, it's somebody else.
I can wait after you, Eric.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric, and then Ken.
Just going back to that recommendation on race mobile home, I mean, the 3 bullet points that you have there, meaningful community engagement, I think is fine. Consideration of development without displacement, I think is okay. Outlining relocation assistance, I'm sorry, what is an ROC? It says an ROC for park residents.
That's the resident-owned communities. That would be a conversion into a home ownership. That was resident-owned communities. That's a
oh, okay.
You know, this was presented at that mobile community.
Yeah. I think that ROC and also the obligation to become a CLT I think that portion of it, I agree, is too prescriptive coming from us. In a sense that we're sort of outside what's been going on with that process. It looks like David, the Mount Vernon task force seems to be more closer to the issue than we are. So I don't think, personally, I don't think comfortable making those kinds of detailed recommendations, not knowing the background and not knowing the implications of those specific recommendations, whether it's a resident-owned community, if that's what they want, or a community land trust, if that's feasible. I don't know. And I would personally be not very comfortable making those recommendations.
I think that's a good point.
And Michelle, you said it yourself that they're doing a in-depth survey on the stock that we have with all mobile homes in the county. And until that's done, we really don't know exactly what's going on from the residential side to who actually owns their mobile home, or they're renting that mobile home. We know that they don't own the space because the owner owns the space and all wherever they may be. So I think that, you identified that we will have to do a survey, and we also have to do a meet and greet. And like Eric said, with the individuals that are already living there, they already have a better idea of what's going on. They may not always agree with it, but we don't know that until we actually talk to them. And I think that what David was trying to imply is that from the time that they got into talking to some of the residents and getting a feel of the land, the way of the land, is what prompted us to come to these recommendations. And I think based on that, I hear what what's his name was saying, that you can't just let developers and lawyers go right for what they want, because they're about making money and they really don't care how they get it. But it can't be just throw something up against the wall and it's gonna stick. You have to make sure that it sticks. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I stand on that.
I think there's just an inherent contradiction in a statement by Fairfax County that says, this is an affordable housing inventory and asset. It's important. We have a goal of maintaining and preserving and growing our affordable housing, and we have not even touched on the element of equity. And I think this is a Latinx community, a low-income community that will be, in effect, totally displaced if this mobile home park is allowed to redevelop. So how do all of these county goals and principles square with the redevelopment of this site, which is why I'm hoping that we have highlighted at a very high level. And by the way, we got sidetracked a little bit. I agree with what Eric said about being too prescriptive in identifying a resident-owned community or a community land trust. I think that's a very good point, Eric. And I think that should be removed. And those kinds of conclusions should be arrived at by a collaborative that includes residents and others. Because in some of this community work, residents do need folks who are knowledgeable about land use or what can and can't be done. But it should be a resident-led process. So I agree with that, Eric. I am mindful of the time. Go ahead, David.
Michelle, can I just add really quickly? I agree too with Eric on that. I think you don't want to be prescriptive. And also really, I think what we're trying to get to here, and particularly what happened with Raise, is that we want to establish a process where the residents can be heard, that their voices are part of this process. And I hear Dan too, there are lots of shortcomings with that SSPA process. Believe me, I know that. And I agree with them on that completely. But I thought what was good about the Raise and Ingleside discussion is that I think there's room there for developing a process that where you can involve the residents in discussions about these mobile home park developments. And I think that's kind of where we ended with those discussions in the SSPA process, is that people felt that there would be, that those conversations would happen and that they would happen with the community. Mm-hmm. And that was a real improvement. That was a real upgrade over what had happened before.
Right.
And so that's all I want to say. I think when we make these recommendations, I think we just want to emphasize that this is an ongoing process that we want to put in place so we can hear from the residents.
David, I totally agree with you, and I applaud the thinking of the committee that tried to look for kind of the silver lining in this and how you could find a positive aspect of it. And that was clearly way before these recommendations came out, way before, in effect, what I am hoping is that the county can find its way, like they did with Tyson's, in a much more impactful decision to put redevelopment of Tyson's on a 10-year hiatus. That the same thing should be considered for these mobile home communities, that this is larger than the Ray's mobile home community redevelopment. That is the imminent threat. But ultimately, everyone can be at risk with all these, with this lack of clear language in our zoning, in our comprehensive plan, and protections. Mm-hmm. So let's ask the county to put everything on a pause, if that's legal. And I'm not a lawyer. Any other? I did sit for the LSATs. Any other discussion on the recommendations? I'm mindful of the time. I'm happy to go maybe till 3:15. Judith is smiling at me. Can we do that?
It's fine with me. I have all the time in the world right now, so if others are fine.
I know people have, in this age of Zoom, we're all going off to additional Zoom meetings. Any other thoughts on the other recommendations? I don't know if we scrolled down to everything. And also, are there any questions from those who are not on the committee in our listening audience? Do you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like to add?
And also, Michelle, real quick, I just want to chime in and ask, I'm not sure if everybody's following what's on the screen. I'm trying to capture what I think I'm hearing, so would love just a quick check-in on this one about Raise to see if that is what the subcommittee is feeling. I see a thumbs up from Ken.
Yeah.
And David.
I'm wondering about this, considering a development hiatus of the mobile home community. I would like I don't want this to apply only to Raise. I don't know, what does everyone think? That any discussion on redevelopment of mobile homes should be suspended until until this interagency task force has been formed and more work is done.
I agree with that, Michelle. I think that let's get it away from Raise and just make it more community-wide. I hear you.
I was gonna say we have more than just Raise mobile homes. There are plenty for us to do at the county. So I would like to just take Raise out and say all mobile homes, and then we also have to put in the fact that people who are living in mobile homes are working class, so they may not be able to attend every single community meeting that we have because of the nature of them trying to make their money so they can pay their bills and stuff like that. We have to also be thinking of them and making sure that everyone has a chance, an opportunity to make it to a meeting. If you can't get to the first one, maybe the second or third or whatever. And that should be taken in. That should be the ultimate importance, because we don't want what happened with the planning commission before in other areas where the residents showed up, but the people that were actually going to really, really have a mouth in it couldn't show up because they got hey, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow at 7:00, be there. Who can do that? You know?
And you're always thinking ahead. Those are really good points. And I think what you're referencing is what I would see as a whole separate, comprehensive community engagement plan that talks about all these things, how you interact with the residents, where, how you contact them, all of that stuff. So I don't want us to be too prescriptive, but that should be part of the work that an interagency task force does, which is why Neighborhood and Community Services as an agency is on there. I want to make sure that the health department is on there as well, Judith, in this interagency. And I don't, the county may decide that they want the schools on there as well. But given what we know about the Healthy Places Index of these parks, it's something that we looked at, I think, in our second meeting. The numbers are low. And so I think that's another aspect of equity, housing and health. So anyway.
Okay, so I included possibly FCPS. We definitely have health department.
Thank you.
Okay, and then
I don't know if how does the committee feel about maybe this getting put? Is everyone happy with? Do you feel like we've captured everything, and do you understand everything that's on here? And I'm sure there will be opportunities. These are recommendations that we are going to present to the full preservation task force. When, Judith, is this in January or?
So I think we may have the opportunity to include it December 17th. We're still, the actual task force meetings are actually being changed. You will all receive an email soon. We are actually going to convene as a full task force this Thursday instead of separate groups. I thought you'd be happy, Michelle. And then so we're working on the 17th plan as well. Depending on how things get worked out, it might be great to have the recommendations for the 17th. If not, definitely by January 7th. Okay. So what we may want to do, there's a little over 2 weeks before when we might need it first. So perhaps we can share this with everybody, and everyone can see with the changes and think about it, and send either Michelle or me whatever you're comfortable with. Michelle, any comments, additions, changes, and we can reconcile that and share again.
I love that idea. I would say send your comments to Judith because she does such an excellent job of, gathering, collating, and then getting it back to all of us. And also to any staff or others that need to see this who have been assisting us. We could not do this without the staff, Judith. And again, a shout out to Huna, who has done, I couldn't do these slides and this information without her. So thank you for the work that you've done, Huna, in helping us with this. Really, really appreciate it.
Judith, you are a rock star.
Yes.
Thank you, Ken.
Is there anything else or any questions from anyone who is listening who wants to ask something or make a comment?
Can you just scroll down and see the end of the document? I just want to make sure we didn't.
Yes. So these are actually, I had copied from a Word document. These were comments from DPD about some of them that had additional information. So I brought it in here in case anybody wanted to see that.
Okay. Okay, great. No, just want to
make sure you see everything. Yeah.
Yeah, just want to make sure. And thank you so much for all the preparation and work that went into this. It was a really excellent recommendation.
It's really good.
Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle and Judith. It was really good.
I got one question. Did we take out Ray's mobile home and included all mobile homes in the county instead?
So I have it here as two separate ones. If you want to take a look at how we did that and see if you want any changes. And in the meantime, I was just going to say to any of our public attendees, you don't have the ability to come off of mute. So if you do want to speak, if you would please send me a message, then I can unmute you and have you share any comments with us.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I see what you did. You said any mobile home community redevelopment. Okay. All right. Is that anybody else? Michelle?
Looks good to me. Does everyone?
Okay.
It looks very good.
Okay, I want to thank all of you, members of the subcommittee, for your work and for participation. This was a challenge to take a pretty expansive topic and do it in 3 hours, which is basically what we did. So we will have an opportunity to present this to the full task force. I'm sure there'll be more discussion. And my hope is that we can get more in-depth look at this topic through an interagency task force. So, okay, if that's it for the good of the order, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the people online who participated. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
What am I doing here? Why am I still up here? What's going on? Leave event, I did that. Here we go.